So if you're stepping on my toe and I forgive you, you mean it won't hurt?
Many experiences that I had growing up in New York City riding the subways, which very often would be very crowded, and it would be impossible not to be jostled or have your feet stepped on or smashed. And New Yorkers somewhat deservedly have the reputation of not really caring, you know. It's not always the case. But if somebody steps on your foot and they quickly turn to you and say, "I'm very, very sorry," I guarantee you it will hurt less than if they had not only stepped on your foot but pushed you down to rush out of the exit door.
I mean it sincerely, because in that moment that I'm forgiving you, I'm experiencing something differently than I would have had I been angry and upset and judging and, you know, suppressed it or whatever I did with it. And so, but in that moment, I'd have to have a holy instant in order to forgive, because I couldn't really do it of myself.
The holy instant would, in that moment, would be you're asking Jesus or the Holy Spirit to help you not take this personally. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. You don't take what appears to be an attack personally, even though it may be meant as an attack by the other person.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just elaborate a little on that, on the idea of not taking personally. That basically is what it means to forgive, is that you don't make the connection that the ego would have you make between the other person's attack, whether it's a verbal attack or a physical attack, and yourself. Helen had a number of experiences. I recorded them in my book, but one which is a very, very classic one in terms of this, is that she, and this might have occurred before the course started, actually, even. But she lived in an apartment building in New York City, and there was a bedroom and on the floor above her, and there was a woman who had the very annoying habit, from Helen's point of view, about midnight, would start walking around her bedroom on the wood floor, no carpet, in her high heels. And Helen would have to get to bed at a reasonable hour because she had to wake up early to get to the medical center. And she'd be storming in her mind and stewing and really furious at this woman for being so insensitive. And she was thinking of all kinds of things she would do. And at some point, in the midst of her raging, internal raging, she said, well, the problem really is that I think there's a cord that connects her high heels with my head. So that I think she's stomping on my head. And if that's the case, all I have to do is cut the cord. So being a very visual person as well as an auditory person, she took out a scissors in her mind and cut the cord and went right to sleep. Right. Now, the stories are not always so simple, clear-cut, or have as happy an ending as that did. But the principle is very clear. The problem was the interpretation she made. And what was really galling her was not so much the sound of the heels on the floor, but the idea that this woman would be so insensitive and unthinking and uncaring, and that's what did it. It's the same thing in the example I just gave about the crowded subway. Somebody steps on your foot but apologizes quickly. It doesn't hurt as much as if the person was very callous about it and blamed you for it. You know, why did you stick your foot under my foot? You know, et cetera. And in a sense, that's what forgiveness is all about. You restore the appropriate causal connection. The reason I'm upset, the reason I'm tossing and turning in my bed is not because of what the woman is doing or this person did or what the person said or anything else. It's because I'm making a connection, a false causal connection between that person and me. Right? And that's an interpretation, that's not a fact. You know, the Course emphasizes that perception is an interpretation, not a fact. And so the interpretation is, she's doing this to me. If I change my perception and I no longer see the cause of my distress as being her high heels or something outside of me, but being my own interpretation of what she's doing, and I change that interpretation, then there won't be a problem. In a sense, I think it's a good paradigm for what the process is like. You don't deny what the other person does. You know, if a doctor says, you know, I'm very sorry, but that lump is cancer, you know, you don't make believe and say, well, it's all an illusion and that breast was over long ago. I mean, that's stupid. but you could look at it differently. You don't have to take it as a personal attack, either by the doctor, by your own body, or by God, or whatever. In a sense, it's just another event in the world. And the choice is, do I look at it through the eyes of my ego, which is the eyes of blame and hate, and fear, or I look at it through the eyes of the Holy Spirit that says, this is another opportunity for me to learn that I'm not my body. No, don't try to force spirituality on yourself. Don't try and force a metaphysical truth on yourself when you're so anchored here in the world and in the body. I mean, that's silly, and it's not spiritual, and it ends up making you an absolutely dreadful person to yourself and everybody who has the unfortunate experience of being around you. And that's why I always make fun of Course in Miracles students, because they're awful in this regard. They don't understand level confusion, and they don't understand the difference between a metaphysical truth, which is true, or a metaphysical truth that they don't believe in. And they certainly don't live as if they believe it. They may understand it intellectually. You know, that's why the whole image of a ladder, I think, is very, very helpful. You know, that he gives us in the Song of Prayer. That the idea that prayer is a ladder, forgiveness is a ladder, it's a process. And it's only right at the top of the ladder, just before the real world, that you begin to understand that this whole thing is made up. And you begin to not only, again, intellectually know, but you experientially know that you are not here. That yourself is outside of the dream. And again, it's not a mere intellectual concept, it's an experience. That's what allows you to go through your day, and your days and days and months and years without being affected by the world. Yet still involved with the world, because you know that you're not here. That's what being in the real world is. But that happens right at the top of the ladder. Until you get there, you're still bound here. You still wake up every morning, stagger into your bathroom and look in the mirror, and you see something that you mistakenly think is yourself. Some days you may like what you see. Most of the time as you get older, especially, you don't like what you see. Right? But whatever it is, you think what you see is you. So don't pretend that you're not a body. Now, on the level of the body, the world certainly does do things to us. Right? Jesus is not suggesting that we lapse into denial, where we make believe the world has no effect on our bodies. It absolutely does. You know, he tells us, chapter 2, that to deny our physical experience in this world is a particularly unworthy form of denial. He's not saying deny the world, he's simply saying deny your interpretation of the world. And in a sense, that's how you walk through life, is that you don't try and change the external world, you change your mind about the external world. You know, as the beginning of chapter 21 also says, that you don't seek not to change the world, choose to change your mind about it. And the idea, again, is that you don't take what other people do or say personally. The ego will always have you take it personally, getting back to the purpose of the dream. The purpose of the world's dream is that somebody else did it to me. And so therefore, my immediate reaction will be, why did you do this to me? How unkind, how unthinking, how unloving, how uncaring, how mean, how vicious, how cruel, how murderous. And realize that that's the ego's reaction, because that's why the world was made. So we could always blame someone and something else. Remember, again, that's a very important line. Perception is an interpretation, not a fact. My physical eyes see perceptual facts or objective facts in the world, but my brain interprets those seeming facts. And the brain's interpretation is a direct reflection of the mind's decision. If I want to find people to blame, I'll find them without any problem. But I could just as easily see the attack, as the Course says, the attack as an expression of fear, and fear is a call for the love that has been denied, and I don't feel I deserve, or that person doesn't feel he or she deserves. I have no power most of the time over the world or other people in the world. But what I do have power, the only thing I have power over, is my own mind. And I can either interpret the world through my ego's eyes, which will always be in terms of winners and losers, victims and victimizers, or I will interpret it through Jesus' eyes, which will see us all as sharing the same interests, the same need, and the same goal.